Lindy Farms. I am the outlaw at Jerry Lindy Farms. I grew up in southern Minnesota. It's my wife and her two parents, which I'll introduce in a second. Elise was also supposed to be here, who's not only much better looking, but very much more involved in the operation from day to day, and the whole business is named after her. So she's got a lot more of the vision, but she got pretty sick yesterday, so she's not able to. But just to give you a sense of what we have at our place, so this is our long driveway here, which is now mostly gravel but partially ice. We also have a driveway here, but this is Jerry and Linda's house. This is our house, and then the freestyle barn's there. The creamery is right behind the garage. There's a 4-acre pond here in between. The creamery is right behind the garage, and then we've got heifers and calves there. So just to give you a sense of where we started. This is Jerry and Linda. They're always working, so I have a picture of them working. But they started on the farm in 1983, but started milking cows in 1979, and had 4 redheaded daughters. You'll notice that. So that's the name of the creamery. If you don't know or haven't met the Jennisons, they're all redheads. So that was, I think, my idea. Elise thinks it was someone else's idea, but regardless, it became Redhead Creamery in about 2011, and we didn't break ground until 2013. But we were pretty sure of the name at that time. And the reason for creamery was very simple, because we didn't know if we would be making cheese forever. And if we wanted to make something else, we would have to rebrand and retry a new logo and all of that. So we put creamery in right away, which was one piece of advice that we got when we lived in the Northeast. Second. Although they started here in 1983, they built everything on this farm besides a 50-cow tie stall barn in the middle there, which is cleaned out and is now our holding pen, and this granary, and our house, which was built in 1906. So those were the only 3 buildings that are original. Otherwise, Jerry and Linda built everything from scratch. But even in 1983, they thought about this place as an agritourism destination. So just, with that as an idea, they kind of built the whole place thinking about tourism and being able to have people come. So if your farm isn't fit for that, you may not be able to do some of the things we do, or if you're starting anew, you may be able to do it even. But I met one of these 2 people in college with the curly hair, and we started talking. Elise, already at age 18, was known as Cheese Elise. Sometime between that first picture and here, she had decided that she was, first of all, coming home, we think at about age 10. And at age 16, she decided, I'm making cheese, no matter what. And so by this time, she was Cheese Elise, running for Princess K, and as her boyfriend, I was doing everything I could to talk her out of a really stupid economic idea, and that's why we got along so well. And to further give her, that was a terrible idea. Oh, here's her butterhead at the Minnesota State. To further give her evidence, she took the value-added marketing tour, which now Dean of the college, Brian Boer, when he was a professor. We went to value-added places, and by value-added, I mean ethanol. We called dairy value-added in that class. We went to Melrose Dairy Proteins, which is what they're about to go in here. And they talked about the economics at all these places. And I told her, you're never going to be able to compete with Melrose Dairy Proteins. Don't even try. I was wrong. But so she took an internship there the very same summer, and that was one place where she got really hands-on lab experience. And I think that's something that has been one of those little things that you don't necessarily need to know, but it's been really nice to know for her to be able to work in the lab. In 2007, she went on a trip to Switzerland. I think CFANS, the College of Food, Ag, and Natural Resource Sciences at the U of M, still has this trip each May, but it's a homestay for 4 days, and she got to affinage cheese in a cave there in Switzerland. So that was something that really turned her on, that, I think this would be fun someday. Again, I'm still trying to talk her out of it at the in the meantime, in 2007, I did an internship in Washington, D.C., and really got turned on to politics. I was sitting there, and there were 2 interns next to me, one from Texas A&M, one from Texas Tech, both complaining about getting stuck on the Agriculture Committee. And that's when an idea popped in my head that I don't think farmers really like this stuff. And so if I do it, maybe at least someone who knows about it, because the other guys one wanted to be on Veterans Affairs, and one wanted to be in the Education Committee, but they got stuck on agriculture because it was the last choice and their grades weren't good enough or something. In 2007, we both had on-campus internships, and the reason this is important is because although we'd been dating for a year at this time, we were able to kind of start exploring things together on campus. There was a pilot plant, and we just observed stuff because you're in college, you got no responsibilities, and you're in summer in college, so you really have no responsibilities. So we were able to talk about some of this stuff, and again, I was working really hard, mostly at out of this. But we graduated a year apart, Elise in 2008, me in 2009. And Elise worked for a company called Acosta Sales and Marketing. Has anyone before today heard of Acosta? Well, Brian has. Who? Amanda has. Okay. Yes, I had not either at this time. Elise had not either. And in 2008, she was going for jobs right at the time the economy crashed, so it was slim pickings. Her first choice was, I'm going to get a cheese job. I'm going to go to Melrose Dairy Proteins or some other cheese plant in Minnesota and get a cheese job. There were exactly 0 of those available. She got offered a job at Izzy's Ice Cream to be one of their, it was an hourly job, but one of their managers there at the store down in the college area in St. Paul. And then she got this offer to her, which was a well-paying job. She'd never heard of it. She gave a presentation about farming and her love of food, and they hired her on the spot at the end of her presentation. But now that I've showed you this picture, you will notice these guys. Anytime you go into a grocery store, especially if you're in a grocery store in the Twin Cities or St. Cloud, these guys aren't always there, but they're there quite a bit. And what they're doing is helping the guys at Walmart, and Acosta's biggest account around here is Super Value, so all the Super Value or soon to be formerly Super Value stores, they help them make more money. And so they do what's called a planogram. They plan out the shelves and say, here's where you need to put stuff to make the most money. They literally, for the first 3 months of Elise's full-time job there, she was in a leadership development program, so she was seeing all of the company. But she was literally going to shelves, refacing everything, making things look nice, sometimes building a new end cap, sometimes talking to the store manager and saying, you should put an end cap here, this will make you more money. But that's what they do. And then, of course, they do the sales and the marketing itself in addition to the planning and the actual structure. That ended up being really, really useful. I worked for Horde's Dairyman that summer and out in Wisconsin, and writing is kind of my first love. And writing something, I want to make sure I don't pull this apart here. Writing is something I really, really enjoy. And I never would have thought, oh yeah, me being a writer, that's really going to help a cheese business. But kind of what Becca said before, that really helped us with our first grants and our first business, I think. We moved to Vermont in 2009, and I got a government job, government relations job with Holstein Association USA, and we moved to Vermont, and Elise was pretty sure her cheese dreams were dead. She was pretty sure we were never coming back. And when we got there, we realized that Vermont was a pretty heavy cheese state. They have about 50 artisan cheese plants, and we probably visited 20 of them that were on farm at the time. And my mind started to change a little bit when on her third day of work we lived in Brattleboro, Vermont, which is where the Holstein Association is headquartered. And on her third day of work, she came home and said, yeah, today I sent cheese or got the orders for cheese for John Travolta, George H.W. Bush, and what's that guy's name, but the CEO of Disney Pixar. And so light bulb went off in my head and said, oh, people actually buy this stuff. Interesting. And so then we for the next 2 years living in Vermont, did everything we could to visit as many places as we could. And one thing here, and we said this in Rochester as well, but we really, I think I can speak for all artisan makers, cheese and otherwise in the state, we really want you to succeed if you go into this. Because if you don't do it right, and if you screw up, and not just financially, but food safety wise, or put a bad image of the industry, it hurts all of us. We're so small that we want you to succeed. So just like farmers have always been willing, I think, to share designs and share things that work for them well in protocols, I've found in the artisan industry, it's a pretty open book. Now, you can't just walk right in and think you own the place, and we've had a few people do that, and they're not always welcome. But if we get to know you and see your intention that you're heading in the right direction, we will, at least at our company, we will tell you literally everything besides the cultures we make for our cheese and what we're going to do next. So otherwise, it's open book financial. So this is Grafton. They had 3 of these cheese vats. They were not a dairy farm. It was actually owned by a private foundation. They were really, really good at losing money. So Elise went through 3 CEOs in her 2 years there. Long story short, there are 3 CEOs more after that, and I think they've got to the bottom. So this is somebody well endowed, huge operation, history, great branding. Everybody knew Grafton Village Cheese in Vermont and even New York City, but they were not making money, and they weren't even paying taxes to not make money. So just keep that in mind. If this is easy, this is kind of the scare you straight portion of my talk. But to think that anybody can make money doing this, just be careful. So they were about, I think, 8 to 10 times our current size. But this picture doesn't sum up cheese making in one picture. I don't want to put it that low. But this picture here, looking down the back end of goats, this is probably what changed the minds of our whole family. In 2010, Jerry and Linda, my parents-in-law, and I think Maggie too, my youngest sister-in-law, came out to visit. And the first place we took them was right here, Fat Toad Farm. Fat Toad Farm makes cajeta. That's goat milk that's kind of baked down into basically caramel. There's almost no byproducts. It's a great process. It's just a lot of heat heating up goat milk. And we're looking at that, and they had about 60 goats, I think, at the time, and we're looking around the yard, and we're asking these two retired professors. Again, they fully admitted that, you know, they didn't start with nothing, but we're asking these two retired professors, so are you cash flowing? Are you making money? Can we ask that? Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, we're doing it. And looking around and looking at what they had, I think all of us got back in the car and said, we can do this. Like if they can do that with that, we can do this with this. So these 4 goats, along with 44 others, are what turned us on into cheese making. This is their name brand. Actually, if you Google them, there's a big story on them because hurricane, I can't remember which hurricane, went all the way into Vermont, destroyed their entire warehouse. So they did 2 big things. First of all, they won a FedEx grant, partially due to that publicity, and they were on the front of New York Times and many others because the hurricane that traveled up into Vermont just destroyed everything. But there's a lot written about them, and they're just great people, and they don't know it, but kind of turned us on to everything. So we still sell their caramel in our store because of that. At the same time, Elise started getting really involved in the American Cheese Society. This is kind of the cheese convention each year. So she started going in 2010 to Seattle. She's gone every year since. I've joined her for the last 5. But one of the reasons I could do that is my next job and my job after that, after working at Holstein, were both for dairy magazines. And so we had a reason to cover there. And it's about a $700 registration fee, and we didn't have $700 at the time, and didn't have a $700 business expense to write off or anything like that. So I would go and get my press pass, and that lets you go in for free, and write articles about the cheese convention. So I would be able to accompany her with several of those. But the last 2 years, we've gone to a lot of those. But in 2010 and 11 alone, and we moved to Wisconsin in the beginning of 2011, I would guess we visited about 40 artisan cheese locations, and some of those were with my job. I was visiting dairy farms all over the country, and I would throw on a value-added thing just to go talk to them or say hi. Actually, I think that's how I met Pat. Was one of my first articles on value-added, and then I would guess we've visited, as the 4 of us, 50 to 70 since. For her birthday/Christmas present, I gave Elise in 2011 a full ride scholarship paid by me to the Vermont Institute of Artisan Cheese. I think it was about $2,200 at the time. It was kind of it's not the Cadillac because there's things you can do for thousands more than that, but it was a higher end. There's cheese classes and other courses, ice cream, milk, you can take for hundreds of dollars. But to afford that, we actually moved to Wisconsin. I flew her back to Vermont for this, and she slept on somebody's couch that we found on Craigslist, and then the administrator of the program picked her up and went to class, took her to class. You can't go to the Vermont Institute of Artisan Cheese anymore because that lady who picked her up and went to class embezzled $350,000, and it's shut down. So don't look for the Vermont Institute of Artisan Cheese because that lady kind of ruined it for all of us, but she spent 9 years in prison, and she's going to spend 9 years in prison. So in 2011 and 12, we lived in Wisconsin. I did the same sort of thing, visited a lot of plants. I worked again for Horde's Dairyman and was traveling the country. In 2013, we moved home. We had Lucy, and that was kind of our drive of, okay, if we're going to dairy farm, we're going to have to do it in a different way because of how we saw at least the economics going with Jerry and Linda's farm. We would also plan to fly home. We would plan to fly home for Christmas, and we'd plan to fly home when our farm business manager would meet with the farm. So we were talking about this in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, once a year, and then that would lead to other conversations. Almost immediately, we made a Facebook page. I think we made it about 2 years before we started a Redhead Creamery Facebook page. And we've also made a Gerlinde Farms page not too far after that. And the reason is, first of all, they're separate businesses. So we did that for liability after talking to lots of people. We separated the businesses as an LLC. There's a lot more risk on the food side. So we have four businesses essentially, but we have the land, which Jerry and Linda own, and we have the farm, which all four of us own, and we have the creamery, which all four of us own. And then, we don't really own anything besides our cars. So those are the businesses, and hopefully, if the cheese plant's profitable, we can start buying into the other businesses. But this ended up being a good thing. We have a tag sale here at the end of March for the dairy farm. So we've been able to promote some stuff for sale, or if we're looking for help or buying on the farm side as well. So it's been beneficial to us too. At the same time that we were starting and looking at building plans and all of that, so we had after visiting all those plants, we kind of had our design down on a napkin or a piece of paper for about 5 years before we built it. We did two big things that I think really help us stand apart. We decided when we visited one plant in Vermont, they had windows looking down, and it was the only plant we've ever seen like that. They had windows looking down, so you're not looking at the side of a cheese vat when you come in. We said, we're going to make a second floor viewing area so you can look down. And that window was about right here. And Linda, my mother-in-law, when she saw that, thought immediately of her grandchildren and said, guys, that's great, but why don't we put that window down at 2 feet? So we have big windows that start at 2 feet so all the kids can see them. So we hadn't seen that anywhere else. We've seen a few people build it since, but that was one thing. So with that in mind, that we were going to do tours and have a lot of agritourism, we went on Kickstarter, which was just getting hot at the time, and this is in the middle of it. At the end of it, we had 501 people raise $42,000 for us. Becca talked a lot about grants costing money, or you're not seeing the money and time you put into grants. Kickstarter, we gained $42,000 minus fees, so probably $35,000 in revenue, but I would guess we made $0. By the time we sent our rewards out and spent all the time organizing the rewards from 500 different people and saying, I didn't get what I wanted, I really wanted this color hat and not that color hat, we probably broke even. But what we did is we had 500 customers before even opening our business. So worth the investment, but not a rich quick scheme, and I would say that nothing in this business really is. This is my first design for our logo. This is the by the way, you guys are all invited on Sunday. Yes, you're all invited on Sunday to the Padua St. Patrick's Day Parade coming up. But this is our first advertisement in 2012 that I made, and so we just threw out some cheese sticks that year. But Elise and Linda, shortly thereafter, started making cheese at the University of Minnesota. As we were getting our building plans together and started practicing at the University of Minnesota, there's a great pilot plant there. It's a long ways, but we trucked our own milk down just to make sure. Bongards is our creamery. They really helped us out with that a lot. We put it in a big tote. Happy to talk to anyone about that if you're interested. And also South Dakota State's got great facilities, but was just too far away for us. So we practiced there, I think, 3 times. We've also made butter there one time because that's probably the next route we would go. But we're just trying to get the cheese under control at this point. So there's Linda at the pilot plant. They have pretty much everything besides fluid milk. I mean, they don't really have a bottling thing, but I think you could make pretty much any other product there that's class 2, 3, or 4. So this is what the logo ended up being. They didn't like my advertising. And like I said, we had kind of had this thing figured out for some time by visiting all those other places. So the construction part was always stressful, but the design part, we had that nailed down a year or so before we built. Here's a view from that window looking down, like I said, and that's Elise making cheddar. So we got lucky with a few other things, and then we went to work. So one of the things that was happening at the time was the League of Minnesota Cheesemakers was starting up. Some restaurants were really interested in promoting Minnesota cheese, so we had a fundraising dinner, and Elise brought that cheese that she made at the University of Minnesota. We weren't even making cheese at our farm yet. Brought the cheese that she made at the University of Minnesota, and the chef liked it best and announced that to the crowd and bought all 3 wheels we had in production. So that was great. I mean, you have wheels that are worth $100-some, and you sell 3 of them, and you've got no expenses so far besides your rental of your plant. It's like, oh, this is going to be easy. The rest of the sales after that weren't. But then we really hit the farmers market and demo circuit hard. So there were a lot of days I would milk, and this is before I worked here. I was in grad school at the time. I would milk on Saturday morning, get in the car, drive to Alexandria, do the farmers market there, get in the car, drive home, do a tour at 1 o'clock on our farm, and then milk the night shift. It wasn't every Saturday, but it was a lot of Saturdays. And that was what it took to bootstrap. And so like Becca said, don't think that, oh yeah, we'll just farm and do this on the side. Elise and I were lucky enough to both have kind of off-farm jobs. Hers was kind of consulting a little bit for one cheese plant here in Minnesota, and then just being free to work on this. And for me, I was in grad school, so as you know, that's like a 30 to roughly 40 hour job, but there's a lot of leeway given. So it was a great time for us to start, and we only had one child, and we weren't over 30 yet. So I don't know how we would do it now. But soon we got on shelves at the American Cheese Society. We developed a great relationship with one of the distributors here in Minnesota, and so we were very, very fortunate, and you could replicate this if you went into the same thing, but our relationship got us on the shelf before we were even started. And I've heard a lot of people that does not happen. We had talked to these people and known them very well for 7 or 8 years. They had toured our farm, toured our creamery, but you know, we got lucky in some ways, but it was also the work that we put in 7 or 8 years to get on the shelf almost right away. Then we went back to the American Cheese Society. This is their Meet the Cheesemaker event. So we do that every year, and that's a big thing with a lot of prep. And we have a billboard at Highway 71 and just south of 94. That started in 2015, because now we kind of have 3 revenue channels. Wholesale is probably about a third, retail on our farm is about a third, and then agritourism on our farm is about a third. So here's the keys to our success, and then I'll turn it over to Pat. We've had a supportive family and lender. One of the sponsors today, Central Minnesota Credit Union. Brad is our banker there, and if we were at a credit situation at the time where if we would have said back in 2012, 2013, we want to build a new freestyle barn, he would have said, good, go, I know how to do that. We said, we want to build a cheese plant, and he said, what? So all the books that we had read and research we had done with Extension, we gave him that stack. He went through that, read all the books, was asking us questions about definitions. And so just having him being so supportive, not even from the credit side of things, but understanding what we were trying to build, I think was very, very important. So great to see lenders here. I think that's really, really important. Like I said, we worked with our farm business management instructor for 5 years before starting this. And Elise, I mean, we would not be doing this without her. It's her passion and interest. None of the rest of us said, we all said we'd like to make more money. We're still working on that part, but none of us said we want to make cheese. So without Elise, we wouldn't have that. Time to travel, explore, read, and visit. We were at a good age to do that in our situation. Now there's no way we could start this with our current time allocation with the off-farm rules. And then I mentioned the rest. With the grant writing, I applied on my own for the value-added grant when we first started, and I did not get it. We hired a grant writer, and we got it with a really high score, and I'm a writer. All the state grants, I've written those. There's a really good one for construction, value-added grant here in Minnesota, and the USDA grant that I mentioned earlier, that's just for marketing and kind of ongoing expenses. So it is tough, but having a writer in the family helped with some of the business planning and that sort of things, but some of these high-level grants, I say you would really need a grant writer for. So now we sell at least 5 cheeses. There's several others that we do occasionally, but we do Red Temper, which is a cayenne. Jessica can probably do these better than me. She's our intern a couple years ago. But Honey Chipotle, it used to be cayenne, Honey Chipotle cheddar, garlic cheddar. This is our Little Lucy Brie, which is our best seller now. We went to Lunds & Byerly's after our distributor took us on. Then you gotta sell it. The distributor just distributes. And so we're like, well, where should we go first? And they said Lunds & Byerly's. That's who we had the best relationship with. And he said, we need a Minnesota farmstead cheddar. So what was the first cheese we made? A Minnesota farmstead cheddar. And then that Minnesota farmstead cheddar went on the shelf at Lunds & Byerly's. And it sat there with 85 other cheddars on the shelf at Lunds & Byerly's. So we probably had a 1 in 85 chance that people were going to grab that out. We are the only brie in the upper Midwest. And so if people are looking for a local brie, especially a small-sized brie, they grab ours. And then the same with the Whiskey Wash Munster. So those two have become our big sellers, even though our biggest customer, Lunds & Byerly, said, we need a farmstead cheddar in Minnesota. They were right. We still sell some, but those two quickly overtook it. And then this is a version of our cheddar as well. So I'll take questions after Pat talks. But no, no. Changing it again. All right. I went too long. I'm sorry. All right. Questions. Oh, okay. They changed it on us. Got it. So, questions for me.
So I know Elise does a lot of events. So can you talk about kind of the selling it aspect and what's required in terms of getting to the cities, doing events, partnering with other entities?
Yeah. So the question was, Elise does a lot of events. What's involved in all that? I would say early on, we took every opportunity we possibly could. We were going to things probably twice a month at the beginning, and just people hear about a new Minnesota cheese plant, they want to help, or they think they can connect you with customers. We were probably in 2014 and 2015 going twice a month to one of those things. We used to be in 4 farmers markets a week at one time. Jessica, were you here when we were still doing that? No. So that was even 3 years ago. We quit that already. But farmers markets, just like Kickstarter, great to get your name out there. But at least for where we're located, not close to our closest one was Alexandria, 40 miles away. By the time you drive there and come back, I could have spent 3 hours on the farm doing something else that's probably a lot more profitable. But it would get you in line with restaurants and get people picking it up at the stores. So I thought it was something we needed to do at the time, but now we do 0 farmers markets. And they beg and they want us to come back. But when you go there and the 5 Saturdays a year where you're making $600 of revenue, if that was 52 weeks a year, it'd probably be worth it. But those where it rains and you get $50 and come home, that's a pretty crappy day. So I hope that answers your question, Jen.
Well, how about the partner events, like the one with Milton?
Oh, partner events. Yeah. So now pretty much we're at a point where I have insisted we shouldn't be doing things for free anymore, because that's kind of how it starts. Oh, come do a cheese pairing and bring all your cheese for free and work for free and go home. So those are the things we do probably once a month now. We do on-farm dinners. December to January is pretty heavy, and but I mean we pretty much have to charge a fee now for everything. Otherwise, we would just miss too much time sleeping or in the cheese plant or working with the cheese. So what I didn't talk about is we make cheese 2 days a week, but we also spend time working with the cheese 7 days a week. So we thought we'd be making cheese 7 days a week and then we'd go to bed. But the cheeses we're working on take a lot more affinage, which is working with them in the caves. Harold.
Can you explain a little bit how you store the cheese and how you age it and how long it's in the aging process?
Sure. Harold asked how long we age the cheese and the storage process. So every cheese is different, and the great thing about cheeses is you can make up whatever you want. There's no rules unless you're going for a standard of identity. So our cheddar sits on the shelf with different names at 6, 12, 18 months. Because we have smaller wheels, they don't really last past 2 years. And a lot of people ask us for our 10-year aged cheddar after we've just told them that we started business in 2014, and it's hard for people to understand. The brie we usually sell at about 3 weeks, and then it usually stays on the shelf until about 16 weeks. The Munster we usually sell at about 3, 4, 5 weeks, and stays on until 13 to 16 weeks. And they're in a cave right underneath our cheese plant, so we kind of have a retail area, and then right underneath that area is 2 caves, a small one and a big one. But it's. Have we explored any markets for cream cheese? No, we'd need all new equipment, and I mean that's the problem. We can make a lot of cheeses, but we can't just jump to like mozzarella would be difficult to make. Keith. What's the byproduct? Okay. Yep. So Keith's question was, if you don't have a market for the byproduct, what do you do, or does that put a big damper on the cost of production of your regular product? Is that kind of what you're saying? So we set it up, again, talking to a lot of other cheesemakers. That was a big problem. People were finding pig farmers, artisan pig farmers, especially in Vermont, to come pick up the whey and then dispose of it. But we built our plant so it pumps right to where our augers are for our grain. So that's our last stop for our TMR mixer, and we're close enough. We just kind of lucked out that it replaces some corn in the diet. We have no byproducts, in other words. A little bit of wastewater that filters out into our pond. Other questions?
Are you using 100%
Sure. So Sandy asked, what percentage of the milk are we using? We are using about 8.5% of our milk on our farm. We could go to about 25% with no modifications. We could go to 50% with 7 days a week, 2 shifts, and several places of added storage. But I think one of the best things for us has been growing really slow. We were not a retail business before. We've learned a lot about retail. We were not a cheese manufacturing business. So if we could get to 15%, that would be a great spot to get to next, because if all of a sudden we had such demand that we got to 30, we'd have a lot of angry customers and different problems to deal with.
Can you talk about the on-farm dinners and what steps are supposed to get to do that? Success rate?
Sure. So the question's about the on-farm dinners, and essentially, what actually happened was our cheese vat blew up 3 times in 2014. It blew up on Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and another time in August because of incorrect plumbing. So I guess some other advice would be, don't go with the cheapest plumber. It looked like it was going to save some money, but it didn't. But anyway, after we got through that, we had a store, and we had a cheese plant, but we had no cheese, and we had buses already booked, so excited to come. And so we had $5,000 left in our budget somehow, and we said, we're going to tile the floor. We were planning to not finish our upstairs for 5 years. We're like, let's focus on the cheese now. If we get into retail someday, we'll get into retail. So we finished our floor with tile with that last $5,000, and then we had no cheese all of a sudden, and the buses started coming. And so we started selling other people's cheese because we already bought a cooler. And through that, some people were like, would you guys do a dinner here? And we're like, hadn't really thought of that. And so we bought an oven and installed it and started one dinner, and it went great because Linda is an excellent cook. Again, without her, we couldn't just do dinners. So Linda's an excellent cook, so we started the dinners, and we didn't advertise for the first year. It was just word of mouth. And then now we have 2 standing dinners, New Year's Eve and Valentine's Day, and otherwise we usually get 1 a month. Besides, like mid-November to January is a lot of holiday parties and that sort of thing. We probably do 1 or 2 a week. Yes, we are Redhead Creamery LLC has 3 licenses. We have a cheese manufacturing license, we have a restaurant license, and then we have a retail license. So we are 3 different agencies looking over us. We got to go eat now? Okay, Pat, last one. Which agencies? So we have Minnesota Department of Health for the restaurant. We have the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for selling retail products that are packaged already. And we have Minnesota Department of Agriculture for our inspection for our plant. So it typically lines up just like a dairy farm. It's every 6 months. I'm sure it's the same with you, but for those who don't know, the inspector will come with clean clothes, go through the plant, and then she'll go inspect the farm. But now Department of Ag is getting more specialized in that, so I think they're going to have plant people and dairy people so much as they can. So I think we'll get a new milk inspector or a new plant inspector. I can't remember which way. So I'm sorry I talked so long, but it's time to eat. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'm around all day, or I'm around until 1:30. So thank you.